Hey guys, welcome to the stream. Today we're talking about funding, the funding saga that seems to have rocked the X realm of the last 24 hours, or maybe slightly longer. A lot of people getting jittery about questions being asked about who is funding who. People are getting blocked. What's going on? I thought we're all in this together in a fight for democracy, transparency, accountability. But all of a sudden, questions about funding get people jittery. What's that all about? That's the subject of today's stream. This is impromptu, and I don't know how many people will join. It's quite late on a Saturday night. And I also put out the space at short notice. So I don't know how many people will be interested in it, but I just thought it would be useful for to people to just air out their fresh thoughts on the topic, whether or not you believe it's much ado about nothing, if it's a distraction, is it an act of subversion by the state and government operatives? Is this an organic? I don't want to call it a pushback. To call it a pushback is too strong, but is this like an organic next phase of conversations about accountability in civil discourse here in this country? So I'm just gonna welcome those who have just joined the space, and I'll just wait for more people to hop on. In the meantime, if you're interested, you can let me know your thoughts. In case you'd like to share your thoughts, just send me a request to be added as a speaker. Hop on and let me know what you think. So the title of this space is "There's Nothing Wrong with Funding," but I see we have so far 2 people. Oh, that's great. There is nothing wrong with funding, but it's always but. So why but? But because um questions. It's all very well and good to want to hold the government accountable for things that they are supposed to do but are not doing. It's all well and good to hold them accountable for crimes they're committing against the people of Uganda. But then what happens when the whole accountability aspect of civil discourse becomes commercialized? It becomes an industry with now different stakeholders, and then money enters. Can such conversations then be said to be organic? Or is it an exercise in what some people call astroturfing? Astroturfing, if you're not familiar, is essentially a term in politics, which means when people sort of they manufacture sort of social movements, right? Either through using money or using other means to create the impression that there is a great social wave, either in favor of an idea or a policy or against, and then they use various other tactics to amplify its volume, so that a casual onlooker might be led to believe, "Damn, this is a real thing." And then maybe I should get behind it too, sort of thing. That's astroturfing. So the culture, the civil discourse that's currently been captivating Ugandans for the better part of a year or even longer, is it organic? Is it astroturfed? If not, why do we think that? And if so, what are the potential ramifications of that? How does this play into the conversations people have been having over the last day or two regarding funding? I'll start by saying that I do not believe there is anything wrong with funding. If you wish to promote a cause, a movement, if you wish to defend certain special interest groups, whether based on ethnicity, gender, or any other demographic criteria, and you feel that to advance that cause, you do need resources, because obviously if you're going to do it full time, then your time will have to be paid for. I mean, you could do it purely out of your love for the cause. You could be a true believer and simply sacrifice your time and your energy and your efforts for it. But then how are you going to do it full time? Like, if you want it to be effective, then you might have to do it full time, and that might require for you to have your needs met one way or the other. So you reach out to benefactors, either locally or foreign, who might support you with the material contributions to pay for your own time and efforts, because you got bills to pay, of course, or maybe to pay for the expenses you're going to incur in service of that cause. It could be manpower expenses. Maybe there's people you need to hire. Maybe there's services you will need to spend money on. Maybe like graphic designers, IT people, PR people, catering, rent if you're occupying a building or office space. So if for that reason you're like, okay, we need money, and the people who seem most willing to give you the money happen to be people not in the country, there is nothing wrong with that. As a country, we do that. When we want to build roads, when we want to build schools, when we want to build hospitals, when we want to build stadiums, and we realize we don't have money here, we look for people outside the country to give us the money to do these things. And this is true for the vast majority of non-governmental organizations also. Those that might be aiming to help women, maternal health, mental health. It could be girl child, boy child. Then there's of course, there's LGBT activist groups. Whatever it is, you might have a cause you believe in and you want to push it, and so you find ways of raising money to promote the cause. And some of those sources of funding will be foreign. From a moral standpoint, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And not even from a legal standpoint is there anything wrong with that. There is nothing in the laws of this country that would prevent any organization, non-governmental organization, from seeking funding to carry out activities. The law simply does provide a mechanism through which you will be permitted to do that. There is is it called the NGO Act, right? So they force you to adhere to certain criteria, right? And I think if you're a non-governmental organization, you sort of need to provide various forms of accountability, indicating your sources of funding, your expenditures, and you have to submit your audits and things of that nature. So that's not a big deal at all. So I think the conversation that seems to be happening now is more about, not so much about whether it's right or wrong to receive funding, but what the implications of there being potential funding for some of this work. The reason why it's a very pressing question and an important one, for me at least, and why I've been involved in this conversation is, as you know, if you've been following me for the last couple of months or so, and I've only just recently began getting like really active on X. I've mostly just been a Facebook person. I'm new to Twitter. I've had a Twitter account since 2011, but I pretty much just neglected it. And I really have not paid attention to it. I also wasn't really sure how to use the platform, how to engage with the platform. It was rather unfamiliar territory. So for me, my Twitter experience was very was not I was not active. I was more active on Facebook. So I came to Twitter and began to be more active on it in the last, I would say, between the last 6 months to a year or so. And only recently have I sort of dived into the conversations about civic participation. Now, it helped that I came from Facebook, a battle-hardened veteran in online discourse and debates and argumentation, because I don't know about Twitter, but in Facebook, these fights would get brutal. Like, if you think there's heat on X or on Twitter, man, you need to have seen some of the discussions that were taking place in Facebook or have been taking place there over the last several years. So I came to Twitter and literally just found people playing around, literally playing around, a lot of virtue signaling, a lot of posturing. And so when I started to get a lot of attacks about the views I was expressing, especially about the protests, a lot of people thought they'd attack me, slander me, malign me, attempt to damage my reputation, and they thought I'd just sort of cower away. But Facebook taught me to some very useful skills, and so I'm a battle-hardened social media vet in a debate. So it has not been easy to silence me, and actually, the pushback I get usually lets me know that there's something interesting happening here, and so I should keep making the case for what I believe. And it's something I'd encourage everyone to do. If you have strong beliefs and views about something, don't be afraid to be challenged on it. Put your ideas out there, and if people challenge you back, argue back. If you feel that your arguments have not been defeated, insist on it. And so I've done that. Now, I perhaps faced some of my most fierce backlash in the period that there were plans to stage this march to Parliament in late July. I mean, I was called everything from traitor, government stooge, bootlicker, you just name it. They just came out with everything. And I just found myself increasingly growing aggravated with this sort of cult worship that seems to be prevalent, this cult worship of particular figures that had been elevated to sainthood status. Sort of the accountability crowd, the people who are typically on this platform sort of saying, hey, this minister did this politician did that. The people that are in the business of quote unquote exposing the corruption sort of thing, right? And so obviously that kind of content is very stimulating, engaging, interesting, and infuriating. And so it pretty much has taken over much of social discourse. That's when we're not talking about Nyash or Zari, who are otherwise obsessed with these discussions of various political scandals. And so you ended up with a scenario in which, as the day, as there's a lot of hype surrounding or building about the protests, where there would be people like me saying, hey, maybe guys, maybe it's not such a good idea. I was then sort of met with resistance from people who believed that there should be protests. And there were a lot of sort of big activist names pushing for the protests and calling out people like myself and a few others. You might have seen the cartoon that was drawn of me and Samson Kasumba and Salvador, because we had a different view. And so how does this tie into the conversation about funding that I'm trying to have right now? Here's how. A lot of the criticism we would get for the being cynical about the protests had a lot to do with how allegedly I'm not patriotic, or that I want the status quo, or that I support dictatorship, or that I'm lazy and I don't love the country and I'm doing nothing. What have I done? What have I done? What have I done? In contrast to a lot of the people that were beating the drum for the protests, right? And various forms of aggressive activism against political figures. The funding issue becomes important because since it now appears that a lot of the loudest drum beaters of all this activist noise on social media are doing it professionally. They're doing it because this is how they earn a living, right? Like it's their job to go on social media and to scream out as they can about corruption, this, that, and all the rest of it. And then that eventually bled into the call for participation in the protests. If it turns out that the people that are the loudest about that are people who are being paid and who earn a living to be loud about that, then it sort of makes the entire thing disingenuous. Now, I feel like I have the right to be offended at all of these people and their minions who attack me for not wanting to get on board with their crusade. And yet it turns out that a lot of them are just doing this for money. That's what they do. They go to the donors and they say, we want to create civic spaces, we want to raise awareness, this and that. And then sort of they fuel the flames of civil discontent and indignation, which almost culminated into a large-scale protest. And then they get to take that to their donors and say, see, these are the results of all of our work and all of our activism. And the more impactful that noise can be shown to be, that is then what sort of justifies whatever it is that they will be seeking from their donors. Hey, donors, look, we're here, doing civic stuff, civic spaces, making noise. Meanwhile, it's all just so that they earn a living doing it. Like if you were doing it like pro bono and you really like believed in the cause, then that's one thing. But like if this is your job and you're being paid good money to do this, good money, then I'm like, then somehow it's just not legit, man. The whole thing is just a bit of a grift. So next time you want to call for a protest or a march to parliament, hey, maybe line me up with some of that money and then maybe I'll join you too, right? Because it's a bit unfair, isn't it? For you to be agitating for people to get mad and to get angry and attack politicians, text them 1,000 times a day, call them, don't give them peace, go to the streets, protest, it's your right. They're telling you to do all this because they earn money doing it. And then when it comes D-Day for the protests, right? Then nowhere to be seen. None of these activists are on the streets themselves. But then they'll just say, hey, but in case you decide to get onto the street, we've been telling you to go ahead and do it and encouraging you to do it as your civic right. But if anything should happen to you, don't you worry, we'll come in afterwards and offer you assistance. So on the actual day, they're not going to be there. But then once you get arrested, then they'll say, okay, now we want to help you. And then and then they go to the donors and they say, hey, this is the hard work we are doing. It almost seems, am I being a bit too cynical, or does this just seem a bit weird? Does this seem just a bit too weird? So I'm just gonna invite, if you'd like to hop on as a speaker, just send me a request and I'll add you as a speaker, and you can let me know what you think about all this. And if you think I'm wrong, please, I invite you to correct me in my perception. So I think we have Twesije who's been added on. Welcome to this space. The topic is there's nothing wrong with getting funding, but we're here to talk about the ongoing controversy about activists and funding and any related issue. Go ahead, Twesije. Twesije, can you hear me? Twesije, is your microphone on? You are a speaker. You can hop on the chat anytime you want. I also see Isaac. Isaac, you're there. Isaac's Semakade, who's obviously been involved in these conversations for much longer than I have. And Isaac is an activist who I consider to be a different breed of activist. He's more sort of boots on the ground type of activist. He's the kind of activist who actually takes the fight where it's supposed to be. He challenges a lot of these issues. He challenges the government in court. And then he's won, actual victories where there's actual end result that he can point to for the work that he's done. And, he's obviously not someone that's just, doing it for social media clout. So he too has sort of been noticing this sort of trend or the shift in activism that has been taking place. And to his dismay, it seems that the activism that's going on now is more performative than effective. People want to be seen to be making noise rather than doing anything that has a positive impact. So, Isaac, I've added you as a speaker in case you're there and would like to hop onto the chat. Please feel free. Isaac Semakade.
Yes, my brother. Fatboy, can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Perfect. I thank you for giving us this opportunity to commune as Ugandans and reflect in a post-mortem discussion about the topic of the day. There's nothing wrong with getting funding. However, there is something wrong about being squeamish and duplicitous about funding for civic work. In our particular case, we have three demigods: Spire, Jim Sentongo, Agatha Atwaire, and the Godwin Toko. More than a year ago, they ran a campaign demonizing this very space, actors in it, telling half-truth and outright falsehoods about some of them, especially weaponizing their anger against their former comrades. Little did they tell Ugandans that they were doing that in preparation for them forming another NGO that would repeat the same things. In fact, they simply sought to decapitate competition and repress it. Now the evidence is available. We have seen them. They received a grant of $1 million from USAID. They have not disclosed this. They refused to disclose it. They received part of it. The grant was for developing a media unit, a media organization, because media organizations have collapsed. The motivation for the grant read as follows: Uganda's constitution guarantees freedom of speech, expression, and of the media. Uganda's media landscape features numerous private-owned media organizations as well as a handful of government-owned media, with national and regional reach operating print, broadcast, and internet platforms. While media houses are heavily reliant on advertiser revenue, advertisers are fast switching social media as they seek to keep in step with fast-changing media consumption trends. Many media organizations run on such unsustainable financial models, unable to fairly compensate journalists for quality work. Gaps in the media regulatory environment present challenges for the availability of independent operators. Intimidation, harassment, self-censorship, and payment for coverage are often features of media operations. So this call from USAID sought motivated media organizations which are independent that will present a sustainable business model, or that will provide credible and engaging reporting, analysis, and debate on public policy issues, or a way of navigating a regulatory environment that doesn't hinder the ability to operate according to accepted journalistic standards, and provide Ugandans better information about governance of their country and participating in strengthening its democratic foundations. So those three people under Agora submitted an application and they received this money. They did not tell us. They did not tell anyone.
Just a minute, Isaac. So what you have read to us thus far, can you tell us what you're reading from?
Yes. So I'm reading from a USAID document called Annual Program Statement for Uganda Democracy, Human Rights and Governance. This is a program funding area number 1, media strengthening. Under this program, there are 2 people who have received money, the Agatha Crew and Serwanja. They have formed what they call media organizations, and typically they do spaces on Twitter and they tweet every hour of every day for a lot of money. This must hurt you very much, James, because you run a media organization in this space which is innovative, but you run it on commercial principles. Number 2, this application wasn't communicated to you. So you were talking about the problems of integrity. These people were approached privately, personally. They didn't compete. They didn't compete against you. They didn't compete against Uganda. They were favored with this opportunity. Yes.
Point of objection. My understanding is that with a lot of these funding opportunities, I know that with a lot of these funding organizations, USAID, European Union, GIZ, and many others, British Council, what they will do is they have particular platforms where they invite people to apply for these funding opportunities. And they invite you to submit proposals. So I don't know if it would be fair to say that they were contacted directly. Were they not just winners of the... Did they just not win legitimately through supplying compelling proposals?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear you properly. I think...
Okay,
internet.
Okay, let me...
But I've had the question. Yeah, you can maybe repeat it, yeah?
Okay, so to put it simply, my understanding is that funding organizations such as USAID notify the public through advertising the existence of these funding opportunities. And so, would it not be more likely that the two organizations you mentioned simply won through merit to prevent what they found to be
No. There's no merit. There's no merit. They were picked on. You can leave that out.
How do you know that? How would you know that? I say they were handpicked?
Yes.
Because that to me would even seem to be against their own rules. I don't think that the USAID would. Anyway, maybe I don't know so much about this, but typically,
if they come on the space and clarify, but you can take it to the bank. Okay? These processes are not always as transparent as they claim to be. To the contrary, they are very much a business of the club. They are club business. It's a private members only club. Rules are very unclear.
All right.
So anyway, I share much of your concerns about AstroTurf public engagement. And in May of last year, after they had run about 3 hashtag campaigns, I think the Kampala Portfolio Exhibition, something about Uganda Health Exhibition, they were moving on to something else. I got concerned and I said, what's going on? Why are we doing hashtag engagement farming? We don't get a chance to reflect, on what's going on. Is this? Most of the participants thought this is about regime change, and some do. Even on this space, most people may think that these people are curators of a regime change initiative, and the curators are also pandering to that crowd which is brainwashed, eager for any, to read regime change in any effort in the public square, including comedy and satire. They think that these are now weapons for regime change, and so they give them this cult worship you talked about. Yet that is not an issue that has been stated clearly. So I tried to write a thread that brought up that issue, that it would be helpful, since these are not organic civic conversations, these are curated events, these are astroturfed events. Maybe, James, for the benefit of our new listeners, you can describe astroturfed again.
Okay. So earlier I was talking about whether or not what we were seeing, the conversations we were seeing, were the result of astroturfing, which is, to put simply, where particular agents, organizations, or entities try to create the impression of an organic social wave, either in favor or against a particular policy or idea, by engaging in activities that amplify particular voices to make it seem it's arising naturally, and yet it's the result of an investment of money sometimes and other strategic activities meant to manufacture the illusion of a social wave, as though it is organic and yet it is manufactured. So that's the simple definition of astroturf.
So a common phrase that has been used lately is outrage farming. Maybe you can also describe that, James.
Okay, my own understanding of outrage farming would be essentially when you engage in posting things that you know are going to trigger people's indignation and anger, and usually social media amplifies that kind of messaging. Now, to be fair, anyone who's an online personality, I think, does engage in it in some form or the other. I'll be the first to admit that there are times when I might be in the mood to throw a grenade into the public space, just to get some chatter going. I do that. A lot of people do that. In my media space, it's not unusual. Sometimes when journalists shoot with headlines, we call it clickbaiting or headline baiting. So obviously, it would not. Any good activist would also want to initiate discussion by posing provocative questions. Now, personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in principle. But you seem to be implying that this forms a business model, and you think that it is being exploited for the wrong reason, Isaac?
Well, thank you very much. Of course, there's nothing wrong with outrage farming. The app that we call Twitter, or formerly called Twitter and now X, was designed exclusively, disproportionately for outrage farming. It's an app for Twitter wars. It is not an app for holding hands and singing kumbaya. It's not a church app. It's not a church hymn app. We are not a choir on Twitter. We are supposed to celebrate a festival of opinions across a wide spectrum. And yes, outrage is on the top of the expectations for this particular app. This is what sets it apart from the rest. And that also helps. We shall come back to it for those who are new, but you did explain the metrics. For you who is converting from Facebook to Twitter, you did very well in the introduction to explain the maturity of audiences in engaging with outrage. On Facebook, of course, in Uganda, Facebook in Uganda, you had attained a robust culture of debate by the time we entered the last skirmish where it was switched off. Debate had matured to a level beyond what I can call Komanyoko and cloud and cults and stuff like that. There was an established culture of celebrating dissent and so on and so forth. Now for Twitter, this is quite new. Most people joined Twitter during the pandemic, and they joined it, as you said, to continue their celebration of Nyash, Zari, and Aziadi fan bases. And so they are very new to political engagement on Twitter. It's also carried out in English predominantly. We haven't yet manipulated the app and the conversations into vernacular. So the conversations exist within a very narrow corridor, what we call an echo chamber, and a number of phenomena that have emerged on that, which some of these are experienced and, as you said, highly motivated. We can call them hashtag merchants, have learned to manipulate, and instead of expanding the field of conversation, they've completely narrowed it to these levels of extreme radicalism, as you probably brought it out. The point of grievance, of course, one is the point of integrity, that they don't disclose that they are benefiting financially from driving public conversation in a very extreme and poorly moderated manner. That has done so much harm, for instance, to the edifice of law, to the Ugandan appreciation of law, legal institutions, the role of lawyers, legal outcomes, and so on. Because when people look at a university professor, they look at Agatha identifying as a lawyer, Toko identifying as a lawyer, and throwing a grenade that somebody is corrupt. This is corruption, speaking in conclusory terms and repeating this every hour of the day for a fee to them, and refusing to engage, in a more nuanced and fairly moderated manner that would seek to get other objectives. So they've now settled for the objectives of popularity, keeping the crowd, the cult worship has gone to their heads. So the other objectives, and this particular program from USAID has an objective called civic education and engagement. This is not the money they receive. This is a whole different plan. For them, they receive money to build a media house, a new age media house. I don't think they have done that. They may think they have, but they haven't. So they are pandering between civic engagement and education, and they are doing it very poorly without any ethical and moral, parameters. Because now our concern and our bone of contention is that they have inspired mob rule. They have inspired mobocracy, where a cult figure accuses, and their cult worshippers, are invited to testify and convict, and then provide execution, and then deny legitimacy to all dissenting voices, including the very institutions of law in our jurisdiction, unless those institutions sing from their hymn book. It is important. Yes.
Isaac, just a lot of people are going to be confused by the time you are taking. And I think I've seen some people ask you, hey, I thought you were on our side. You were supposed to be with us fighting corruption, exposing stuff for corruption. So most people assume you'll be on the same team as the new army of online anti-corruption activists. So what is it exactly that you see is different from how you are trying to hold corrupt people accountable versus how they are doing it? Where is the point of departure, and why is this a point of concern for you?
Well, thank you very much for that very particular question. The point of departure is in the following 3 ways. Number one, starting with the theme of astroturfed conversations. You hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Am I clear? Yeah, I have rain where I'm speaking from, so I'm afraid that. Yeah, but so the first one is the curators, the conveners, the originators of these hashtag conversations reject certain ethical, moral, and integrity obligations to the public that they ought to have, because these are not sporadic, organic conversations. These are pushed and paid for conversations. That requires them to be very careful about how they conduct this advocacy. I will come back to that deeply, but the second grievance, of course, will be the outcome of failure to hold that obligations, to conduct themselves, to hold themselves to these obligations. And the third point I'll speak about is I'll use the parliament exhibition, and I'll use the parliament exhibition as my case study, because now it has resulted in two decisions, one from court and one from the speaker, for discussion. So number one, as I said, these curators are like businessmen sit in a boardroom or in a WhatsApp group, and they choose a topic for us. In this particular case, we saw leaks coming through Agatha Otoko or Osfire, and those leaks were presented to us as gospel truth, with lots of commentary about them, and then the astroturfed conversations, the pushed conversation, the pushed hashtag, the pushed narratives. So any attempt from, say, James or I or others to analyze these leaks and the implications of these leaks on a broader paradigm than the narrow window of conversation in which we are being restricted, received, again, a paid-for backlash. You did get the curators accepting to moderate response around dissent. You didn't see them calling back there. What you called them? What's the word you used for this? You called them minions. Yes.
I call them minions, like a cartoon.
Yes, because now they control what these minions think and act. Okay, so you didn't see them give them, a code of conduct for conducting these conversations, which they are forcing onto the people. So any analysis, dissent, caution received cliched responses such as those you have described. Maybe you can again describe them for our colleagues who are new, because you had a better summary of it.
All right, so the types of responses that I normally receive when, for example, I challenge some of the extreme tactics that I advocated. For example, I absolutely detected the text that people that we campaign. I thought, resorting to what really, even from a legal standpoint, we qualify as harassment of public officials. It's essentially to bombard their phone lines and text. Now, some of the quote-unquote minions even went as far as to say, don't give them peace into it. In fact, I think some of the top guys were saying keep them in public. And some people were even suggesting that they maybe trespass on some of these people's property, go to their home, scribble slogans on their gates and things of this nature. And I was very concerned about all this, right? But then, obviously, I didn't see it as the part of that conversation to encourage restraints in how these how people choose to respond. And normally, when you say these methods are extreme, they will say you can't control how oppressed people will act. That's normally the justification. People are oppressed, they're pushed against the wall, they've tried everything has failed, so you have no right to say, don't do this, don't do that. So there's even a tacit acknowledgement that the methods they're advocating for might be extreme, but they're saying, hey guys, what do you expect people to do? They have no choice. It sounds to me like you're saying that there should be some responsibility assumed by those initiating these conversations. There should be some acknowledgement that the conversations they're starting could encourage extreme behaviors, and that therefore there's an obligation on them to tone that down, or to recommend to their followers to not go too far. That we are not seeing. It seems as long as the initiators are generating massive engagement and feedback, that by that metric alone, the conversation is being a success. Now, I'm not sure what their terms of reference are with the funders, but I'm guessing they are able to go back to their funders and say, hey, the conversations we initiated resulted in this much engagement, this much feedback, this much comments, and so forth. And so from that standpoint, everyone is happy. By that metric, they have achieved the success. Now, as to whether that will translate into anything worthwhile or tangible might be a separate question altogether, and it may be a question that they may not even view as their mandate. Because if your job is to just encourage the conversation, in your capacity as an advocate for civic discourse, then your job is done. That is how I would think of the situation. So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, one way the curators could, one option that was really offered to them, and in private, before we came to the public square as we are doing right now, in private, we met with each one of them and told them that it may be helpful when you get an agenda item, to process it through the quality assurance mechanisms of, say, a law firm or a legal organization, because our ecology is intertwined. We have legal and human rights organizations that claim to have their work anchored in constitutionalism. And why not subject, since you are curators, why not create a safety valve before you come to the public? You review this information and you receive a legal opinion on it, so that you know that you yourselves are knowledgeable about the law of what about governing the matters you're talking about. Because ultimately we are a nation of laws. We may not be a perfect democracy. We are a democracy at work, in progress, and it takes our limited talent. There are not very many Ugandans that have sufficient talent and wherewithal, and even the heart to increase civic awareness within the paradigm of a nation of laws. Now, maybe they have a different paradigm, but if your pinnacle objective is to create a nation of laws, a nation governed within the four corners of a constitution, tattered as it may be, imperfect as it is, if you acknowledge that change is going to happen within the same constitutional framework, then it behooves you to undertake a process of quality, engagement with the people. And that means in this particular case, you yourselves to appraise yourself of the law, of the various intricacies of law. Not to think that you are the law, you know all the law. We all don't know all the law about things. So that at least one outcome from all this hashtag debris will be increased awareness of laws and a better appreciation of legal overreach, meaning that the lowest common citizen can now know what the norms of law are, legal norms on a particular subject, and can show exactly the overreach. Because some challenges, as we may learn, as we have learned, but not quite, I don't think people have that lesson yet. Some challenges are inbuilt within the law, and instead of banishing, individuals, beating them up every now and then we're wasting time. Because if you just change the individual, put the next individual, the legal framework is what is sick. It is what you disagree with, actually. Yeah.
So then someone could say, why not just allow all voices? Because in a way, it seems unfair to impose on them to not talk about what they want to talk about. They're free citizens. They're free to discuss what they want. They're free to initiate whatever conversations they want, right? It's their right. Now, if they're channeling the conversation in a direction that you're not happy with, why not start your own conversation to complement what they are doing? Since at least on those appeals, you all have the same goal.
Thank you very much. The short answer is that they are not ordinary citizens. They are citizens sitting on a $200,000 kitty. Okay, they are over-resourced, and therefore there is an obligation that comes with having that resource. That you will use that resource to engender, to facilitate the growth of capacity in every citizen. Am I clear? You cannot take the money and still pretend that you are an ordinary citizen who can speak from their gut feeling. No, you have taken money to apply yourself mentally, intellectually, as an AD of the office of the citizen. Have I answered you, James? They have cited to the donor. They have cited to the donor that these conversations are very risky to have. They need an intellectual unit. You know, instead of giving this money to every Ugandan, give it to a few of us who are organized, intellectual timber under one roof.
Why don't you, yes, Isaac? Why don't you also go and get funding to have the conversation?
But like I said, you can't go. You're picked for this sort of funding. You're picked. Okay, so the doors are closed. I think I've answered you on that from the beginning.
You have. I'm just saying that your detractors will say that maybe you're just jealous that they got the money. Why is it that just because they got money, they're supposed to dance to your tunes? Why don't you go get your
money?
Well,
I guess the short answer then is that the purpose of this space is to educate some Ugandans that not all grant funding is in their interest. Okay, and they have to learn that. I will speak on that at a later stage, but I think since you brought it up now, because a grant is being dumped on select individuals to drive your conversations in a particular direction based on a deal these people have reached behind closed doors. So we therefore now must ask, what was the content of that deal? If all we have to judge at our disposal is the outcomes. Okay, we are looking at the outcomes now. So we are dissatisfied with the outcomes of how this grant is being, managed, and therefore we ask, what was the content? What was the process? What were the, the parameters? Because if the way the conversations are being conducted harms civic discourse by hardening citizens' attitudes against the law, against legal institutions, okay, against lawyers, against leaders, because the citizens are offered narrow nuggets of information upon which to express outrage as the legitimate result of having public discourse, that's dangerous, because as you well, explained from the beginning, this is how, despite whatever good intentions you had at picking the grants or even originating the grant if you're the grant maker, you're going to leave us with a highly outraged society that has been conditioned into, fascism, where people believe that grievance is the sole criterion for justice. There should be no speech, no debate, no negotiation on it. It is us versus them. We are right, they are wrong. And as you said, the common refrain in these discussions is that for the oppressed, we should allow them to use all means to find their liberation. No. Not in a country which has signed to constitutionalism, a constitution, and to begin a journey to be guided by laws.
Okay, Isaac, I would like to ask you one more question before we take a pause and invite someone else to join us. And that question would be, if we're to bring the back to the issue of the funding and the haziness with which they have been approaching the issue over the last 24 hours, what's your understanding of why there doesn't seem to be much willingness to openly admit to the funding issue?
I think the answer begins last year. They took such a high, they climbed such a high horse last year when they were broke and didn't expect to fall into this money. Now they are falling into this money, and all power corrupts. So they are deeply corrupted now, and they are struggling to find their bearings. We hope they do so sooner rather than later, because then we shall be left with the same tools of bringing them back in line. Yeah, I hope I answered that question. I want to complete my three-part paradigm I had suggested at the beginning and hand over. Have I answered the question, sir? They will speak for their other motivations, why they are resorting to silence and obscurantism at this stage, why they are sounding like Birete sounded then. I will read for you some of the messages I have just seen that came from them last year when they are the ones asking these simple questions. For instance, I think it was Toko. Let me see. Yes. Yeah. So that's upon them. I don't think the grant maker stopped them from disclosing every detail of this money. They're supposed to use it in the interest of Ugandans.
All right. So,
and like I said, for us, we are our basis on the outcome. So as this thing opens, I can probably run through the other two paradigms. So, is there an echo? Fabio, is there an echo? Is there an echo? An echo? Okay,
No,
I seem to hear it on my side. All right. So let me read. I will read those conversations. Yes, I think it's.
All right.
But let me continue. So now, if the curators, don't accept certain responsibilities, there will be outcomes. The outcomes, their failure to accept these ethical responsibilities will lead to certain outcomes which we have ably discussed. I just want to stress two of them. One, I have stressed how we enter fascism. Please help me explain fascism to our people. You are better at explaining this concept than I am. Fat boy.
Yes, Isaac.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, help me explain a fascist state. A fascist state, fascism.
Okay.
The authoritarians, citizen-led authoritarianism, where every citizen becomes a dictator. Yes. Are you familiar with it?
You're worried that this is where we're headed, that the tone of discourse is taking us into a direction of sort of each man and woman a dictator unto themselves, not allowing their fellow citizens the right to express an alternative opinion.
Yes. And the essence, and I think what emerged as militia, where we look for islands of cooperation and consensus, and working towards broader and asking for broader consensus being highly frowned upon. Because how do you unite us with those people? Isn't the goal of our struggle to topple them and get rid of them, throw them in Lake Victoria, and so on and so forth? Please explain that outcome properly, because I've seen you do it properly.
Okay, so the argument that I normally make against and this is my own view and my own argument against sort of popular uprisings. I have observed that recent episodes of popular uprisings that have taken place in places like North Africa, like the Arab Spring of 2010, 2011, the events that have recently unfolded in Sudan and neighbor to the north, you essentially end up with a situation where you simply recycle a new crop of dictators when you try to remove the old crop using undemocratic means. You don't really solve the problem that took you to the streets. You are only amplifying and repeating the same problem. All you're doing is removing one symptom of that problem, which comes in the form of the oppressive regime you have removed. And so without us doing the hard work of building our societies from the ground up, you just end up with a cycle of bad leaders. And as we've seen in North Africa, where there was the Arab Spring, many of these countries have fallen into further economic decay, with a bad dictator being replaced by a worse one. Now you're seeing in Sudan and in the north, it's being pulled by the army. Egypt, same situation. So at least for me, I like to caution the sort of the online sort of pro-revolution crowd that you got to be careful what you wish for. It may sound good and it may look good on paper, but the end result will probably not be to your liking. And today, if you go, you'll see countless articles written about the plight of people in Algeria, in Tunisia, where they're decrying even worse economic conditions now than they had back when they revolted in 2010. My argument is that revolution solves that problem. And of course, not everyone agrees. I normally get pushback on that, and that is fine. But I still think it's an important part of the conversation that needs to be included, so I keep talking about it.
Thank you, James. So, well, to build on that, again, I will go to the next thing, the next outcome, the harmful outcome, called time wasting. So, you imagine we go through this. Yes, the struggle, results in the revolution you have talked about, and we have those same outcomes, and we have to begin afresh. Now, these hashtag merchants will find another donor to continue the process. You have talked about that before while we are starting. Some people may be joining. But for them now, this is a business. And I think you wrote a good tweet that this is a business where they will never go out of employment if they perfect their art or their craft. Speak that tweet, please.
Okay. So the gist of the tweet is essentially my own musings of grievance activism generally. Once it becomes a career, it never ends. And this is true whether you are a poverty eradication advocate, you are an environmental activist, even LGBT activist. Today in the West, LGBTs have more rights than they've ever had in human existence. And yet, if you were to listen to an LGBT activist today in the West, they will talk as though they have not moved an inch forward since 1900. And the reason for this is, if you are a professional activist, your job is to constantly look for problems to fight against. And sometimes you manufacture those problems where those problems don't exist. And in the same way that it is true when it comes to poverty, environment, women's rights, and so forth, the same is true for sort of civic discourse. There will always be reason for someone to want to say that the situation is worse than before. And so essentially, it becomes your job to amplify the problems that may or may not exist. And the question then becomes, in what way you have really helped at all, aside from earn yourself a living, which is not what you're doing. I can understand, but at least own up to it, at least accept it, and then don't berate those who aren't quick to jump on board with it, because maybe you're not as invested as you are. Because clearly we know why you are invested. You have your own financial incentive, and like I said, that's fine. But then don't sort of be so self-righteous about it and act like the rest of us who aren't on board with your agenda are somehow enemies of human progress. That's the part I don't like.
Thank you very much, James. So you can imagine the incalculable toll on national growth, where the national conversation, the national salvage conversation is hijacked by hashtag merchants, professional grievance activists, and they prevent important tributaries of consensus and reconciliation, even amnesty from happening because they have created such a polarized polity that a handshake becomes death. The person who moves across the floor to embrace the oppressed, who moves across the floor to embrace the oppressor, and begin a difficult emotional conversation that goes back generations, precedes the nation of Uganda. If they dare return across the river to explain the cause for nation building, they will meet with instant death. They will have no audience, they will have no means, no team, no kit, because the entire mass of the nation has been brainwashed into polarity, into identity politics, and so on and so forth, which we can least afford in Africa. So the cost of the time wasted will never be recovered. Let me stress two important issues here.
No, you will forgive me, Isaac, but I'm going to beg that we take a pause. You still have a lot to say to us, and I'm quite eager to hear it. I wonder if you can still stay with us as we allow others to also weigh in.
I will. Thank you for this. Let me just finish this point, then I will leave the parliament, case study to bring back to that later. But on time wasting, I would like to assure, for instance, these conversations have fetishized the youth, but nobody remains in the youth bracket forever. So the current youth who are paying cult worship for these demigods, you should be warned that you will surpass this stage and move into adulthood, move into seniority, and these same people will still be available with the same template. Or there will be a whole new group of people, fetishizing youth as the most important demographic for national conversations and polarizing them only as grievance activists, and so on and so on. And this cycle continues ever and ever without one group is demonized, the other is not, making, what we call horizontal organizing difficult. Extremely difficult, extremely costly, because we are fighting against people who are highly facilitated to make it impossible. And lastly, that means that we can't begin to understand problems of nation building that precede our age, that we have inherited, struggles that our great-grandfathers didn't complete, like the anti-colonialism struggle, the anti-imperialism struggle. We will never be able to give ourselves an ear to start those conversations because we are preoccupied with the now generation, the now issues. Yes, these now issues may be the result of a historical journey on which we got lost, on which earlier generations got lost, and it's our duty to retrace history. You will notice that from the, this hashtag business you had, there hasn't been time to channel history. So let me yield to our host to allow others to speak. But I think I've shown some of the harm done by those who are squeamish about the funding they received from USAID for the time being. I will speak last about the parliament. I will use the whole example about the two decisions, because we have come yet again to the death of another hashtag. And they are thinking probably hard how to bring it back from death, and we waste more time again. But go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Isaac Semakadze. Very powerful input from you. I'm now going to yield to Plessy, who's been waiting for ages for a chance to speak. So Plessy, please, if you're there, jump in. Isaac, can you mute your microphone?
Can you hear me well?
Okay. All right.
Am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead, Plessy.
All right. So, before anything, I would like to first start with acknowledging my own biases. Firstly, I am non-aligned to any party. I have no connections, personal or political, to NUP, NRM, or PLU, or any other party. I am Christian and politically centrist. And obviously, above all things, I love Uganda. And to a point that you mentioned, it is important that we make sure that Uganda never becomes Libya or Sudan. There, I agree with you 100%. So we have suffered way too much in our history. And we really, really need to continue. Despite the extremely slow growth that Museveni is giving us, we need to make sure we do not go backwards in whatever fight that we are going to wage. Now, there is something that has been, it's been an elephant in the room throughout the whole time, Isaac, and you have been submitting. You have not given evidence. Now, you see, even if somebody is agnostic towards all this, or maybe they could be trying to believe you or to follow what you're saying, it would have been very helpful. And I think Brian Akan and Mayende Caroline in the comments were saying that you should at least take screenshots and then pin them in the chat so that whoever is listening can listen to your submission all the while they're looking at the evidence. I also did ask Isaac to give the document he was reading and share it. However, I want to say, please provide the evidence. It comes across as severe going along, with what somebody has said here, I've had this there, I've had it there, and then waging it as concrete fact. And the audience isn't given the evidence at all. So we say they've received $200,000. Kindly share the evidence. We say that they have, he was reading a USAID document where he asserted that Agatha and Agora and all these people, obviously they're human, I have to first start there. They have their own fallacy, weak points and their own failure. But show the evidence, please. You cannot just begin to start saying things and then, without giving us the proof. Your case is made more strong when you do show it in the comments. I really appreciate that. Now, you have very good points on the slight hypocrisy, you see, of throughout the whole time you and Isaac have been submitting the points of March to Parliament. Now, this I've been following March to Parliament, I think, since about May, late May, and it didn't start out with these big name characters that you see. Firstly, I think you look at each of these accounts that keep constantly putting out content about March to Parliament. Obviously, there is a bias there. There's an incentive. You know, the more engagement you have, the more money you get from Elon Musk. That's what life is. And the same argument could be made about Isaac with hundreds of thousands of followers, or about you, James, with 41,000 followers. But what you're correct in saying is that it's wrong to come across as if it's a genuine reason. A counter argument from me would be, should people who have a following, remove themselves from the situation, be at risk of being labeled as influence peddling of public discourse? The same argument could be used to you, James, and to Isaac. You are very, very popular on Twitter. Everything you say, you look at the space, for goodness sake, 72 people. The engagement from this space alone, and from everything I've been seeing you two both tweeting, along with the other people who have other big followings on the other side. I think that point really is, in its own way, blowing things out of proportion and leaving us with a serious failure to address the real issues. I mean, it's really sad that we are discussing all these things, and I'm not saying it's wrong to discuss them, but we should not discount that there's still children under trash at Titizi, and children others who have lost their parents, and right now they're still stranded, trying to figure out what to do. And that topic of conversation is being, pushed back on the list of important things in the minds of Ugandans, and that's a problem. That's my main stance. But let me continue to say, see, while March to Parliament started in May, and while people started coming on, you see, when I joined those earlier on spaces, trying to listen to what was being said, what people were trying to do, what the whole call was about, Agora and Agatha, and all these people that you keep talking about, nobody was talking about this publicly. And even, big name people as well, like Salvador, and even you guys. In those spaces were small accounts, people with 10 followers, 100 followers, 40 followers, And to say that it was not an organic thing, you might have a point there, because it became a national issue once big accounts like yours and like James's, and when I say yours, I'm speaking to Isaac, when big accounts like yours started at least acknowledging that it exists, or responding to tweets about it, or giving you 2 cents about these things, that's how it became a very big thing. But you cannot continue to say quite well that it's owned by them in its infancy. Maybe it was. You see, soon I think James said 22,000 followers and all these things. Perhaps you might have a point there. But this is not what's important in Uganda, please. The most important things right now are that children seriously need our attention around the country. Let me continue. I had written so many things down while the whole conversation was going on. So you mentioned the point about inspired mob rule and, cult worshippers who will deny legitimacy to all dissenting voices and even institutions of law. This was, I think, a point by Isaac, as long as they agree with them. Well, I mentioned initially that I'm centrist. And what I'm trying to bring to your attention is that you are picking out half-truths and magnifying them, and I'm addressing Isaac right now, and magnifying them to suit your agenda. You see, there are things that I agree with Isaac with, but he is using them to go and build up on his own biases and try and influence everybody. Inspired mob rule is a sensationalist way to describe democracy. When people don't like you, they vote you out. Not that they will come and beat you up. Obviously, personally, I don't like that. I do not advocate for anybody that is willing to, go online and start saying, kill them, or let them go, we shall hang them, or all this. That is not what our democracy should be, at least as America defined democracy. Mob rule, inspired mob rule, and so on and so forth, is a sensationalist and really hyper-reactionary way to describe people power, and not in the way, it has been made in Uganda of Chagulani and all these things. I don't want to have it, described as NUP. People power being that people actually choose their leadership. They choose what happens in their country. If there is laws that they don't want, if there is laws that they want in law, they do it quite well. Yes, we do have a system of parliament, but parliament has shown us time and time again that it has its own massive failures. And it's failures that these people, along with me, are addressing and trying really to push forward. Now, it's not a monolith, and I do understand that you could be addressing these larger accounts that are going back and forth with you, and arguing with you. But all this back and forth, it's distracting from what's important. That Chitasi still needs to be handled, and the people there need to be given a solution promptly. There's not just people that lost their houses. People have been or going to be evicted. And that's where our attention needs to be. There is so much going on around the country. We should not just keep saying that, these big accounts on Twitter, are having their battle, so let's follow along. No. And I really believe that you all owe it to the Uganda people, you with big accounts and with such massive followings, to not engage in these petty things, truly. Because they are really, really not of value to building our country and pushing it forward. Now, I remember James asking Isaac what he was doing and how the March to Parliament people's approach was different to his. Now, you see, he responded mainly, sticking to a non-answer of saying that these are not organic protests, so on and so forth. And you've had it many times on Twitter, people are saying, if only these people were genuine. And Seven himself said, I'd be the first to march if these things are not funded by foreigners and if they were genuine. But honestly, state the answer. James, you asked, I did not hear a clear answer on what he's doing himself. And it's his right to do something, not to do nothing at all. But I just would have preferred if he had answered that question. It would have been very, very helpful. Now, if someone starts a protest, if someone starts this march, and then you say it's not organic, and then they have bad intentions behind, and then all these things, please give us the evidence. See, now, if they start something, and if it's just meant to say that, oh, now they're fooling Ugandans, Ugandans are being hoodwinked, are being lied to, oh my goodness, please, let's not insult the intelligence of our people. Yeah? We have citizens who are smart, and obviously nobody in the country, there's a point that he mentioned about that they don't have the knowledge across the country of the laws. They don't know what's in the constitution and all these things. The responsibility of that is to the parliamentarians, basically, and to you as lawyers. But that's not what people vote on in democracies as America has defined it. And as I see almost everybody on Twitter, including you guys, is seeming to agree with, seeming emphasis. The way America has defined democracy is not probably what we could need, but, well, it's up to us to choose. But when you start nitpicking things, saying that this is driving at mob rule, hyper-sensationalizing such things, saying that average citizens don't know what the law is, while countries like China and America, their average citizens clearly don't know what the law is, they just vote on reactionary issues as well. And look at their countries, they're moving forward. So is that what really moves a country forward, honestly? Now, countries are not transformed by slow talking of saying that let us all walk one by one and go to the villages all across and say, guys, this is what is in the constitution, it helps. That is good. But rapid transformation as we need it as Uganda does not happen that way. Look at all these countries, the rapid transformation, how did it happen? Look at America, look at China. Look at the United Kingdom, how did they grow? Be it in war against their former colonizer, or with rapid reforms in economy as China did, or in aggressively running to conquer the world as the UK did. Aggressiveness towards building our country is the only thing that will push us forward. Now, I'm not speaking of aggressiveness and you made a very good point. I really appreciate it on time wasting. You made a point to say that, okay, we go through it and it repeats itself, and then hashtag merchants go through the process again, and they're looking for funding and all these things. Fine. They have no honor in what they're doing. Fine. Thank you. It's a good point. But who are we, instead of taking initiative, to start saying, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing that? And all the while, what's happening? Our country still has issues. It's not growing up. We are not actively taking a stand to say that we will do it our way, and then we'll show them that our way is right. Now, many Ugandans resonated with March to Parliament because it spoke about things that people see everywhere. Every time I go across the country, every time I'm anywhere in the country and someone asks me for a bribe, or they're asking me at Interpol to pay some money so that I can get a document when I'm picking it up. These are experiences everybody has in the country. When someone is trying to get police work done for a crime that has been committed against them, and then someone is asking them to pay something here and there. We cannot have a country that continues this way. And speaking ourselves on Twitter is what people are resorting to do. Well, if there are those who jump on later with bigger following and they're amplifying it for their own gain because they're saying it's something that resonates with people, well, what's the most important thing? A country changing, a country being transformed, and a country yielding results for all its people and having its leaders saying, yes, we're listening and this is what we're doing. We are going to fight it more aggressively. We will not just talk, and whoever is speaking about it, going to exercise constitutional rights on the streets, is bullied, sent to prison, and tortured. We can argue on whether these things are true or not, fine, but that's mainly what not the discussion is right now. You say there's nothing wrong with getting funding. Well, you explained it excellently well. But there is no evidence that has been provided, at least I've not seen it. Clear evidence, messages, screenshots, something in the chat or anywhere to clearly tell us that these people are stealing money. And it's not even public money, it's foreign money. Another thing is, why would Museveni continue to allow $1 million, my God, to come from a foreign account into a Ugandan bank account? We would raise so many red flags across the banks. Now, I want to make a point that it's really important that, and it's not just you, it's me as well, and everyone here listening. Let's make sure we avoid bandwagon support to the issues that seem to lie in your side. Some things you might agree with just because it sounds like they are against someone that was against you earlier. Let us be careful to really break down the issues and not just give our bandwagon support no matter what. Now, there was an issue earlier on the girl Cynthia and the money that recently she has been calling accountability for. Then there is the whole other thing and all these things. And then what's the result of all this? Really, what happens? What changes in Uganda after we've said all these things? The only thing is that in the New Vision tomorrow morning, there'll be a headline, youths are divided over money, over funding. The young people, and so on and so forth. And then there is this sensationalism around all these things. And it just becomes tit for tat. You and me, we are fighting. And the real problems of our country are not being pushed forward. I have really refrained, personally, from tweeting anything about, oh, this person has done this, they have failed to show accountability, they have failed to do this person is accusing this person of something, because none of these things move this country forward. None of these things really fix our issues. And the only result of it is that it's a distraction from what matters. The idea that there is corruption in Parliament, acknowledged by His Excellency, the man in the hat himself, acknowledged by...
Yeah,
yes.
I'm just going to cut in real quick, and I hate to do it because I could just listen to you all night, man. You're powerful, and I love it. But to the question of why we seem to be interested in this, I actually don't think it's a trivial issue. So I take the view when it comes to many of our systemic problems that they are born of a certain thing, that systemic issues are an emergent property of certain cultural beliefs that we have and cultural practices. So we might say to ourselves, well, let us focus on corruption, the bigger problems. But then if you're not focusing on the smaller problems that lead to those bigger problems, then all you'll end up with is those bigger problems persisting. What you're calling corruption doesn't arise out of thin air. It arises out of sort of this culture of people just not wanting to be open and honest about their motivations and why they might be doing things. And while for you it may seem trivial that certain organizations are receiving funding to do this activism, why for us it's important, and the point that Isaac brought up that is valuable is if the funding is being used to create conversations that end up being distractions from solving the actual problem, then how is that not speaking to the same issue that you're raising, which is we're wasting time? That essentially by not by allowing ourselves to get sucked into what Isaac would allege are sort of manufactured conversations, we are in fact sort of taking our attention away from the bigger issues. And if even to ask the question about whether or not there was funding, if it is met with such resistance, to a lot of people it sounds deeply ironic coming from those who themselves are quick to accuse others of not being transparent themselves. I think if you decide you want to be sort of the crusader for transparency, you kind of impose on yourself the same standard. Otherwise, people will struggle to take you seriously. So if you want to call to account for others to be transparent, then I think you are required morally to be willing to be quite open in discussing, some of the questions regarding your funding if people are to ask about them. And actually, they don't even deny that they were funded. Jim, for example, has been saying that just go to the Agora website. They stated there that they received funding. There have been screenshots of articles circulating that speak to a USAID grant that was given in support of organizations such as Agora. Now, for the record, I have no problem, and I'll repeat, I have no problem with Agora or anybody seeking foreign funding. I just think it's important for it to be acknowledged publicly and openly, because those of us, people like you and me, I don't know how vocal you are in sort of expressing your moderate views regarding, say, the protests, but a lot of the feedback I was getting from the followers of these bigger accounts is that I don't care enough about my country, I'm a traitor, I'm not a patriot. And it pisses me off to know that these people are being inspired by people who are being paid to inflame these feelings of indignation.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's a certain sense of fakeness about it, where you're accusing me of not caring, and yet the people that are making you care are only doing that because they're paid to do it. I feel there's a part of me that that inspires me to want it to be known that these people are being funded, because it's an important part. That might in some way, I think, temper the emotions of those who may be so quick to attack their fellow citizens for not being willing to jump in the line of fire with them. I think that's important. What do you think?
Right. Now, I think you need to acknowledge quite well that you and Isaac and Hillary as well, and other people around, even Cynthia and even Agatha and the Agora people, you are privileged to a very great deal different from Ugandans. The average Ugandan is nowhere living the life that you do live. I don't know you, honestly. I honestly I know nothing about the people I've just mentioned, but I do know that you live a much better life, being able to access the internet, being able to be on Twitter and host a space and all these things, than the average Ugandan. That means that in looking at the average Ugandan, I would like to ask that you all try and see it through those eyes of saying that the average Ugandan isn't having this economy work for them. So they can't have the luxury of saying, what's Agora doing? How are they dealing with $1 million, quote unquote, or $200,000, quote unquote, that they're getting from America? The main issue, the main things that they worry about are the things that really destroy their chance to move up. Now, I understand what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. I understand that there is truth, some of it, in what you're saying, in an excessive barrage of arrows coming your way. I understand that, and I've seen it. But that's not what the main issue in the country is. I understand your point about questioning the Agora and questioning where the money has come from, but please show us the evidence that the money has arrived. Show us that the money is there, or that it's, because nobody is talking. You're accusing them. Agora is keeping quiet and saying we will not answer this because it's too small of an issue, and you're not giving evidence. So what is the rest of everybody supposed to do, honestly? And it's quite
Okay. So in response, I would like Jim responded to Hillary, who's actually in the chat. Maybe he'll speak on it himself, because Hillary's sort of been pressing Jim on the issue, and Hillary can be a bit persistent, and I've dealt with him too, so I can understand Jim's frustration.
All right.
But at some point he's like, okay, yeah, so what? No one's denying they got funding. Go to the Agora website, they have it listed there. Yeah, big deal. What's the fuss? So there seems to be an admission that the funding is there, and to be clear, once again, no one minds that there is funding. Let it be there. But if someone asks, is there funding? Why treat it so dismissively? Why do you think that's necessary? Why not just say, hey, let me seek the support of partners in this fight for civic discourse and this and this? The issue has been escalated for no reason other than their own pride and hubris, actually.
Well, both ways, at least from my eyes, because they are accused. You're not heard. You're blocked. At least I've been seeing people being blocked all across the board. And then you begin to tweet about being blocked, and then it begins to be a tweet about funding, and then Agora, and all these things. Why can't anybody be the bigger person and say this is beneath Uganda? This is not important. At least, sorry, I keep saying not important, but what I'm saying is not important is this discourse and distraction from real issues. Now, there is a big. I wanted to continue. I had a few more questions that, things I wanted to respond to.
All right, you want to hold those questions? Let's just hop on over to Caroline. Let's hear what she has to say, and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thank you so much. Make sure to stay in the chat because I want you to keep talking to us. You have very powerful perspectives here. So to Caroline, sorry to keep you waiting. You're on the line now, so go ahead.
Thanks so much, John. It's quite embarrassing that we're even having such a discussion. I'll be quite clear. I think I actually shared some of my questions in the chat box, and I actually asked for evidence, particularly from Isaac, because he read a lot of vague documents and kind of uncoordinated what we're talking about. And I asked for the evidence. You know, it's very shallow for us to debate on something without evidence. And I would actually invite Isaac and Hillary to look for a document titled Civil Society Organizations Accountability in Uganda. It's I think it was a write-up or a research by Commonwealth. Yeah, I think Commonwealth Foundation or something related to that. And as any civil society organization in Uganda is definitely funded, the degree to which each is funded differs. And if I'm very sure most of us on this space are educated, there is no way you demand for accountability from a civil society organization. Yes, you can. There's a criteria, and I was very privileged to work with DGF, not directly, but under one of the organizations that are funded by DGF. And those are some of the things I got to learn. The civil society organization is directly answerable to the funders, the partners, the donors, the board members, and I think there's a certain, like a board, not a board, but I forgot, I think board of directors. The other people that demand for accountability are external factors. And should they do that, they must put it in writing directly to the funders and not to the civil society organization. I think Spire was very candid and very open in his submission. By directing you to the website, it entirely means we are not obligated to give you any accountability. You should ask who funds us to give you the accountability, because I'm definitely sure it is audited by the funders and whoever is interested. Now, Hillary recently attended a Noob convention. I don't want to go political, but I think I need to bring that out. And I would like him to tell us if he asked for any accountability, how the convention was organized, how everyone who traveled from Uganda went to the convention. And then, I mean, when you attend a convention, there's a venue. Who paid for it? And where did the money come from? There are so many activities that happen in a convention. I'm definitely sure Hillary is aware of SMAG, sexual minorities in Uganda. Has he ever demanded for accountability from them? If he hasn't, then he has no right. Isaac himself, once in a while, actually requests for mobile contributions for him to be able to pursue his interest. Has he ever given accountability for it? So it is okay to demand for accountability, but I mean, we are educated enough to know how procedure it should be. You cannot rant about someone blocking you. Everyone has got a right to block you. No one on this space has never blocked anyone, and we all have reasons why we did that. If you basically cannot understand something that I've straight away put out to you, then I have no time to keep going back and forth with you. I think we need to stop being double standard. We need to stop looking at points for our own convenience. Everyone has got a role to play in this. None of us has ever paid Agora for whatever work they were doing, even before the March to Parliament began. Agora has been doing so many activities, and I don't want to dwell on Agora. There are so many civil society organizations that have been doing charity, that have been doing advocacy, that have been doing research. And the fact that they have been going out and we have never contributed anything for them to do whatever they do. There are people that have seen, okay, these people, I think, are doing something commendable. We could support them in this. So if we demand for accountability, we should know when to demand for it. And yes, we have the right to demand for accountability, but there is a procedure. These are civil society organizations not funded by the government, and that's not taxpayers' money. And then
you're right, Caroline. Just to interject, Caroline. I think let me introduce some nuance to this conversation. So there's two aspects. I think the conversation was kind of sparked off by a post from the Cynthia lady, who for her, she has her own internal squabbles with Agora. Those are between her and Agora, and I'm not here to say she's justified or she's not. If she is asking them for accountability, that's her business. The other half of the conversation is just on the question of whether or not there was funding anyway. And actually, I personally, I could be wrong, but I've not seen Hillary demanding for accountability. I've seen Hillary demanding for transparency in acknowledgement of there having been funding. That's what I've seen him pestering Agora about, not about them sort of providing accountability statements. That I've not seen. So just in fairness, try if you can to separate between those who are demanding for accountability. That is Cynthia and company. And whoever agrees with her. That's a separate conversation from the other half, the half where I come in, which is to simply ask that there is an acknowledgement that there is funding, so that then we can also discuss the ramifications of that. And I don't think there is any harm in asking if you are or if you are not being funded. And as Hillary was saying, it's a yes or no question. Say yes, we're funded. Say no, we're not funded. We keep it moving. The only reason the conversation has escalated to this point is because there's just been reluctance to answer that question. Why do you think it would be a problem to answer simple yes or no to whether or not you're being funded?
James, I think Spy was very open in his answer to Hillary in particular. He told him every information that you need is on the website. He doesn't have to answer yes or no. It's not a must. He doesn't have to be answerable to Hillary in whatsoever way. Whether he says yes or no, what will Hillary do then? Nothing. And for the amount quoted,
Wait, hold on. Just
okay,
a
can I
minute.
just submit?
It's
Then you
not
could
about
ask me yeah,
Okay.
let me just submit. And there's no way that particular amount would be transferred to Agora, and there's no due diligence done either by the bank and the FIA, being a civil society organization and having worked in civil society organizations for a while, I know.
Let's say no.
So
Say no. Say no.
for him to continuously press for a yes or no is just selfish and probably looking for
Excuse me.
his own
No, no, no.
salvations.
Caroline,
Yes,
in all fairness, and I've seen others raise the question that someone pointed to how Nicholas Opio was arrested just because $300,000 landed on his account. How
yes.
could a government then allow $1 million to land on an Agora
Mhm.
account and not do anything? That's a fair question. But then the question Hillary and others is asking is a simple one. Do you receive funding, yes or no? If for the reasons you have stated, it is impossible for them to receive that kind of funding, all they have to say is no. Why is that so hard?
James, I'm very sure Hillary knows the answer to that question. I know he knows.
All right, let me let you continue. Sorry for interrupting.
So I think we need to stop being double standard. For so many times, I've seen Isaac be quite dismissive of online protests. That's right from the start. When Isaac called on people to join a space that he had particularly put out, I don't know to do what, or to probably mount on what this gentleman, I kind of forget his name, from Arua was doing. Who vetted it? So we need to stop being double standard. It is okay. And we all know civil society organizations are funded. And there is no money, I absolutely repeat this, that comes to a civil society organization of that amount that's not accounted for. In fact, it would be blocked immediately. And for any banking system, there is a compliance. There must be due diligence. They must provide all information for why this money is transferred and what's the purpose. So these two particular individuals have their own probably selfish or other motives that we have no idea about. I do not belong to any political party, and I also believe in a better Uganda, but not a better Uganda with selfish interests, a better Uganda that serves everyone's interests. And if you kind of look at the people that bring out these arguments, these are people who are hopping onto one issue, one after the other, one after the other. So guys, focus. I know you are educated people. Think through your actions and focus and act mature enough, intellectually and physically. Yeah, that's my submission.
Thank you so much, Caroline. It was wonderful hearing from you. Please stick around. There might be some questions for you down the road. I'm going to invite back Isaac. Isaac, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to some of the points that were raised by Tracy J and Caroline. They spoke directly to some of your statements. I'll give you a chance to respond. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I got some technical glitches. I didn't hear much of what Tracy just said earlier on, but I had just enough to appreciate that he is united in interest with Caroline in being fantastically ignorant about the harm posed by the lack of transparency on one hand and accountability on the other, or from their demigods at Agora in respect of the subject at hand and the broader ramifications of such opacity and manipulation on the national polity. Well, I am happy, Caroline, that you are part of the DGF mafia, which we got rid of in 2020.
I'm not going to accept your insults. You
I'm
should
so
use
happy.
better language. Yes, use better
I'm so
language.
happy
You are literally
that you identified yourself as part of that mafia, which we got rid of, and we now have a better polity,
Isaac, I'm
which
not going
allows
to
for
take your
horizontal.
language,
You
your
said
bad language. You are an educated person, so behave like one, please.
don't police our speech. You
No, you
came
should
with
behave
your
like an
weapon.
educated person.
Well, let me go on with protection. I will not change my words. You're part of the DGF mafia, which we got rid of, and now we enjoy free horizontal organizations, and now we are suffering another mafia. You said mafia, which is overtaking, hijacking our conversations. So let me show the harm. Because you are fantastically, blissfully ignorant, let me show the harm. You may not agree, but I will speak like this so that you remember. I must trigger you. I must offend all your sensibilities so that you remember where this comes from. You do so much harm. You do so much harm our organizing. You pretend to be serious, pontifical people. Let us tell you now that this is our country, and you will speak to our people. You cannot stand here and say that you account vertically.
Isaac,
you account vertically to foreigners.
I'm a Ugandan like you. You have no right to dismiss me.
So,
I'm a Ugandan.
when you had your say, I did interfere. You had your say, I did interfere.
But I will not accept your abusive language. You are an adult above 30.
You
Like one,
will take it as I serve it. You will take it as I serve it.
No, you will not gag me to believe your
You will
foolishness.
take it as I serve it. You are bitch enough.
You will not gag
It
me
is
to
until
believe your
James.
foolishness.
It is until James gave us our space to speak
I am
that you came from
Ugandan.
all sorts of rabbit holes to come back and inject. We are here to fumigate.
Ugandan. I will not
We are
take
here
your
to fumigate
foolishness.
Carolines.
I will not take
Caroline,
your
we are here
foolishness.
to fumigate
No,
DGF
take
mafia
your
and their remnants.
All right, guys, hold on one moment.
Please remove Caroline and I can continue my fumigation. She will get her chance.
All right, hold on, everyone. Let's get some decorum back in our conversation. We've been doing very well. Obviously, Isaac, Caroline is feeling triggered by you calling her part of a DGF mafia. That's obviously very inflammatory, and she's upset by that. It looks like you still will not move away from that characterization. So let's just move past it and get to the broader point you wish to make. Okay, so Isaac, please continue with the point that you wish to make. Let's get past the mafia issue. Go ahead. Go ahead, Isaac.
Okay, I can go ahead.
Yes.
Am I clear now? Am I clear now?
Clear. Yes. Go ahead.
So, James, for the sake of Thomas J, who was sincere in acknowledging that he couldn't see the harm, I can be a little more clear than I was before. Mr. Thomas J, I acknowledge all your points. Believe me, I do. And I thank you gratefully for acknowledging few of the points that we landed, especially time wasting and preventing us from being an aggressive tiger in the emerging and low developed countries, because we have the capacity, however limited it is. However, we are concerned. One, Thomas J, you don't acknowledge. You say we should give evidence that money has arrived and money is inspiring and influencing conversations. Now, unfortunately, James, you belong to a group of people, whether you know it or not, who are profoundly awed by whiteness. When you consider white spaces, when you interact with whiteness, you interact with it with a profoundness that it is better, it is elite, it is structured for the best interest of all humanity, and therefore it is benevolent towards us. So you cannot, and until you start to make a pivot and be alive to the danger of whiteness and therefore white money in black spaces, you may not receive any education in this space. But thank you for being very clear that you're actually blind to the danger of white money in black spaces and in black conversations. I will attempt in the little time I have to speak to that. Number one, white money in black spaces destroys horizontal organizing. It takes away our equality. Those who have received it, moreover, without merit, perceive themselves to have been kissed by an angel, a white angel. So they think that they have been chosen. They have been picked from the pressure cooker in which we all live, and they have been given a safe corridor. You know, so they then perceive themselves, as Caroline has showed you clearly, that their only accounting, center is a white center. That they are therefore now also going to treat us like whites benevolently. They are no longer one of us now; they are one of them. So this prevents horizontal conversations from happening. For instance, Spire, Toko, Agora, and Agatha and Agora live with us here. They see us criticizing them online, and they have never taken a chance to ask us off up to sit with them, commune with them, and solve these issues. Because these issues are ideological. They're not personal. They are ideological. Some of them are structural. Some of them are legal. Some of them are constitutional. As I spoke, that I speak as a lawyer who sees harm to the law, to the legal institutions, to the justice institutions. You know, from the methods, Agatha and Agora. You must understand that some of you, when they see Agatha, Agora, they saying they are lawyers, and then they are passing judgment against leaders that this is corruption, this is illegal, this is unconstitutional. Most of you take it on face value, and you don't question it. You don't question the methodology they have used to reach that level, and therefore you consider legal and constitutional conundrums as foreclosed issues, and you debate from that level of heightened arrogance that is blessed with white money. Then you believe that white money will solve everything. So this is very important, and I can see Caroline is so triggered she can't believe it. But believe me, you, Agatha, Toko, and their entire Agora crew, they now live in a bubble. Okay, they believe that they are now in a parachute. So they are therefore participating in these conversations in a pretend manner. That's why, for instance, they have not attempted these conversations in a vernacular way, and they don't care that they are speaking in an echo chamber. These conversations haven't yet reached the common man, and those of us who know this, who are saying it, you're rubbishing us, but we are concerned. The common man still has loyalty to those you call corrupt. Neither Agatha, nor Spire, nor Toko will be in Bukedia tomorrow, at least to survey the impact of all this social media debris. Has it reached Bukedia? They won't do that survey. They won't get that feedback. And they're part of Uganda. Why don't they travel there and get these answers and then learn? So horizontal conversation, horizontal gatherings, horizontal organizing, horizontal consultation, horizontal liaisons have been killed and will be killed if we don't fight this lack of transparency and accountability around white money in black spaces. Secondly, James, thank you very much for clarifying to both these two blissfully ignorant blacks who are profound honest around white money from white spaces interfering and entering in black spaces. And thank you for, you used the word that the response of those who are acquiring the white bag was dismissive. I would like to change that and say it was defensive. It was suspiciously defensive. And that is the point for this conversation. Why the defensiveness? And why are they so blind to the dangers of this defensiveness? Because the topic of our conversation today is that there's nothing wrong with getting white funding to conduct the work of uplifting the conditions of black man in a post-colony. There's nothing wrong with that. International solidarity is part of the struggle for decolonization. Okay? We can't achieve the complete decolonization alone. We must tap into international solidarity. But then the question is, why so defensive? Why so defensive? That is very important because it triggers so many other pockets of suspicion. For instance, those that the government has come out with and said that, this man is much more than what we know. Now, Justice Hunter and I have some sense of knowledge. We speak from knowledge, unlike Caroline and Tracy, who are blissfully ignorant. We speak from knowledge. Caroline called the papers I was reading irrelevant and incoherent. No, they are not. These people received the same money like Serwanja to create a media unit for investigative journalism. Instead, they are pretending to conduct civic education. You know, they are pretending to conduct civic education and civic engagement without pedagogy, without a sound pedagogy. None of them is capable of conducting civic education and engagement, you know, with a sufficient pedagogy not to cause the harms we have discussed, like leading us to fascism and hypersensitivity, to call it hyperpolarization, to quote my friend Tracy. Okay, they may be doing more harm than good, and they may be doing so perhaps innocently, through innocent mistakes. And we're here to say that to raise a red flag and say enough is enough, guys. Half time. Call half time. Let us retreat in a horizontal manner. Climb down. Zakayo, shuka Zakayo. Spire Zakayo, shuka. Agatha Zakayo, shuka. Toko Zakayo, shuka. Come down into the public square. Leave the white parachute and white bubble. Come down, and we then conduct a proper post-mortem of all this hashtag debris. Because we have evidence that it's dangerous, it's deleterious, or if it continues to do more harm. So I will speak to two forms of suspicion. The first one, as James has shown, and again to correct Tracy, there is a difference between the hashtag mayhem that we saw from last year until mid this year, to be clear, until March of this year, the first Bukedia one. So we had this hashtag mayhem until Bukedia one, when the speaker knelt. You know, the mayhem was too much. It caused such mass hysteria. The subject of it now, the ultimate subject of it now, had to go and secure her political base. And these hashtags did understand the meaning of that, that she went to get political inspiration against what had now become a political move against her. So that is that phase. After that, Bukedia one buried all the hashtag nonsense. It ceased to have any impact because the speaker hosted the president, and the president they read from the same chapter and verse, and they killed it as far as Uganda is concerned. So it became now a war between Uganda and foreigners as for Bukedia one. Now after that, that is where Cynthia and company started to query where this hashtag mayhem was leading, because they discovered that all these people were armchair activists who can't even travel and hold a placard in Bukedia. So being young people with their agency and wisdom and heart, they struggled to articulate themselves and landed on a new hashtag, but this time fundamentally different from the old hashtags. Their hashtag now had a doing word. It was an action. So they succeeded in confronting their own brainwashing at a very elementary level. We now know that when they finally escaped the brainwashing of these hashtag demigods, the same hashtag demigods came into their DMs and asked, after they ignored them, because from March up to May, Cynthia and her sister were alone, you know, pushing this notion of they want to do something. At some point, they didn't have a name for it. You know, we would all look at their tears and just move on. But because there was nothing to do for this hashtag mafia, they realized that this conversation now holds sense, and they came to hijack it. We now know, thanks to Cynthia's storytelling, she shows the exact hour in which Agatha tried and Chapter 4 and others tried to ensconce themselves and pretend to rescue and organize this youth-led, you know, initiative, which caused the conversations that we are having now. Because I don't want to go into that. Our moderator gave a wonderful intro, but also it probably requires a space of its own to see the danger of money. Because Cynthia was very clear in saying that whereas they didn't have all the answers, they had a sufficient sight of what they wanted to do. But when people came and whispered into their ears things like EU, money and visas, and so on and so forth, they lost track. Their solidarity closed. And as we also, the whole thing began, the whole protest got branded. Agora, Agora this, Agora that, Agora this, Agora that. From a legal perspective, we began to see high levels of performance, you know, that had been denied pre-existing struggle movements. Suddenly, the president of Uganda was available to lead from the bar. Bail became such a massive issue, yet ordinarily activists get their own bail without needing lawyers, you know, and so on and so forth. So, but why? So it leads to one important pocket of suspicion that perhaps these people were performing for a vertical overlord who might give them more money if they can be seen to be inspiring these sorts of, you know, street protests. They wanted to claim the transition from slacktivism to street protest. And since they are already receiving funds, it goes with the territory that they would receive more. This is very important, and this is what caused Cynthia and others, and many, they will speak. Today they are still under your armpits, but as they get wisdom and confidence, they will speak, as they get knowledgeable about the dangers of the activism industry, which my leader, James, properly propounded, they will realize that they were manipulated. So the dangers of manipulating youth manipulating citizens, especially the vulnerable, are quite real. And there's so much literature, we can't go into it overall. But please, Mr. President, whatever your views may be, you don't have to agree with me now. My purpose in answering this question was to show you that actually there is harm. Okay, there is a potential for harm. At least you need to acknowledge that there's a potential for harm. The other forms of the last harm that I want to address, I had the question that we are sensationalizing questions to do with money. Civil society receive money. Isaac asks for money too, and so therefore there should be no problem. These people have done a good job in highlighting that there's corruption in parliament, and so on and so forth. Well, the point here, and it's a bit nuanced, but yet fully accessible by everybody here who understands English. At the end of the day, we have to pick up the pieces as citizens. Our valuable time, our valuable resource, time and attention has been given voluntarily to hand-picked demigods. And what have they done with it? And what will be left of this activity? So, from a selfish perspective, as a lawyer in the public law and constitutional space, I know for sure that these processes could have helped leave a legacy of greater legal awareness, a legacy of greater knowledge of how citizens can liberate themselves, first and foremost by being aware of the legal tips and tricks through which those with power act against their interests, a touch into the legal mess, so that they begin to understand it. Because you must understand, our laws are written in English, by institutions which don't always involve public participation. So the instruments of authority which we have given those with power when we go to vote and we go back to our villages and our troubles are not well known. And so much harm is done through law. And because the laws exist and you're not going to wish them away, you will have to rescue yourselves through the law, unless you are actually deliberate about not even just regime change, but uprooting the law itself, doing away with it, and doing a real revolution, which doesn't recognize existing legal norms and which is very clear in its beginning, in its conscientization, that there is a billboard that we are involved in a massive disobedience against all existing laws. We perceive them to be fundamentally unjust and unhelpful in our liberation, and therefore we have launched that kind of war. If that's the case, if you believe that mantra, if you believe that's what this hashtag mafia is about and is where it's leading you to, my friend, you're deluded. I think some people are in that delusion. And therefore we are saying that these hashtags have not fundamentally seen the danger that some of these people coming to these conversations are in a mass delusion, that they are involved in a revolution that is not moderated by law or the constitution. They intend to topple it. They don't recognize any constitutional institution. Okay? That is their consensus. That's legitimate. Yes.
I just a quick one. I just want you to quickly comment on a comparison that can be made about the claim that, well, an NGO, a civil society NGO, should only be accountable to its donors. Isn't this the same problem we kind of have with government also, in them also only being accountable to donors? Essentially, when you rely on foreign funding for your national development, you end up excluding the masses, the public, the citizens from the conversation. You exclude them as stakeholders because you are telling us you are only answering to those by giving you money who happen to not be Ugandans.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James, for bringing that out. The hypocrisy has written itself in all our debris. Some of us who read it and screenshot it and capture it from memoirs are shocked by what we have discovered. It's so immense that when we start to write charge sheets against these people, we shall charge them all the way up to the Calvert. Their level of blindness and detachment to the harm done to the fundamental pillars of national building is unspeakable. Thank you for bringing it out, because they've been asking. The government accounts for all its borrowing to only IMF. And we haven't had the time to even speak this. This is the difference between Ugandan space and the Kenyan space. During the pandemic, the Kenyans had managed to reach that level. Of course, their level of their social media metrics are different from ours. Why for us, as you said from the beginning, we are still fundamentally about Zari and Nyash, and on Twitter we pretend, to engage with superficial politics without going into the intestines of political arrangements and so on. In Kenya, they have surpassed that, so they are able to unite and speak about things like finance bill. And to go to the streets because they have seen 10 US senators come to supervise the passage of a bill. We are still in the dark here. And if this continues, we will remain in the dark. So I want to conclude the point of harm through law. Ultimately, Ugandans are none the wiser about the law pertaining to the subjects on which the hashtags concentrated. These hashtags deluded Ugandans that intricate processes like national budget, appropriation, and parliamentary processes are so easy for them to perceive. It is as simple as Anita must resign, crucify her, focus on her, and so on and so forth. That's fine. That's the mountain you chose to die on. But guess what? Anita has not died. Anita has risen. Anita is celebrating another bouquet there too. She's celebrating. And I think it's the point that I promised to use, James, if you may permit me. I promised to use the paradigm of parliament, because after the pothole, NGO, Uganda Health, and something, they moved into parliament exhibition and they got the reasons for sticking there are not altruistic. They were funded by somebody who has sanctioned Anita without following due process. The US establishment is very interested in creating local conditions that legitimize their sanctions. This is a conversation that these people will not have, because now they have bananas. They are black monkeys with bananas into their mouth.
Are you actually saying you're against the sanctions that were imposed on Anita?
I have written about it, yes. I am extremely opposed to the notion of sanctions. Okay? I wrote 2 essays about it, but there's no time to read. These people, they conduct superficial, selective, civic education. They didn't receive money for civic education. They received money, I said, to create a media house. That's the money they received. Caroline, now I'm telling you. Okay? They received money to create a media house that is appropriate to the current media, ecology, appropriate to the times, insulated against the threats. Yeah? Ahead of discovery, ahead of the government, regulatory scheme, a nimble, agile media house through which we can have robust debate. Instead, it has become a fake propaganda unit for a supposed political opposition without being clear. All of a sudden, neither Agatha nor Toko nor Spire can criticize Noop at all Noop leaders. Is it because USAID funds them as well, so you think you're united in interest? Did USAID confirm to you that Noop is now off limits? These are our concerns. You were supposed to build a media house through which we can have robust debate. You have not done that. Instead, you have cascaded into all sorts of organisms that we can't understand. You're pretending to do civic education and engagement, but you're not letting people know. So the debate about sanctions we never had. They were received, with a chorus of applause, and our voices of dissent were shut down. Well, you want shashas forever? You want shashas forever? We will speak back and say Western sanctions are not helpful to the cause of the black man. There is vast literature, both by Americans, both by global North and global South researchers. Even the CIA on its own website admits this. So sanctions are merely a political tool to achieve political objectives, and they were imposed on us here. Well, luckily, politicians, what you have done, and I wrote that tweet, that you have achieved nothing but to elevate, to give the speaker a baptism of fire, and she has learned very quickly. So she's now a very mature, the learning curve for her has been so steep. So you can see she's doing Bukadia too. After, on the back of the court judgment and the speaker's ruling, and I have challenged Agatha to write an opinion, because she passed LODC. Let her write an opinion challenging the soundness of both the ruling and the judgment of court, which the speaker has gone to celebrate in Bukadia.
All right, Isaac, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to take a pause right now. I'm going to invite back Kwesi J to respond to some of the points you've raised. And after that, I'm bringing Hillary or Justice on the line, because we've also talked about him, and he's somehow involved in all of the controversy that's going on. So first, Kwesi J, and then over to Justice. Thank you, Isaac. Please be on hold for now. Kwesi J, go ahead.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, man, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Isaac, please mute your mic. It's very silent in the background. Thank you. So, firstly, oh God, it's become a very polarized discussion and very animated. Passion for the country is always appreciated, 100%. But personally, I do not. Of course, nobody enjoys insult, or perhaps nobody enjoys being called all these things. But it's all right. The most important thing right now is Uganda, not back and forth. Now, there's a fundamental flaw in Isaac's argument. It's really important, and this is not a personal attack against him. It's really a big issue. Number one, you make suggestions and conclusions based off of perhaps, or it could be this, it could be that, and that's a problem. I've been asking throughout the whole discussion, please give evidence, please give evidence, please give evidence. Where is the proof? What is this? What is this? But then one goes on to say that, there is an idea that they could be doing this and they could be doing that, and there is the West and its influence meddling in our affairs, of which that is, grabbing at an argument that all of us agree with, trying to bend the facts of your argument to line with our own agreements, and that's wrong. I think you should let your points stand on their own, and then instead of rather using common themes that we all share to just begin to attack individuals in this sort of debate. I do not appreciate that, but anyway, move on. Now, America, whether you like it or not, runs the world together with China and Russia because of their nuclear weapons. Fine. I'm not in any way pro-Western. I have no idea who you are. You have no idea who I am. So let me tell you, I am the most anti-Western guy you will find. And I think on Twitter, there is nowhere I agree with America meddling in the affairs of our nation. Because of that, I stand up individually, myself, and I say I will do what I can in my own capacity. I will not walk to an embassy and say, hey guys, I can also help, give me some money. I will not go around, excessively tweeting so that my engagement can go up, so that, I get money from Elon Musk one day or the other. I will not just, engage in arguments so that I can get more engagement. And I think that's something we're all discounting, is that everyone else on Twitter who's engaging with all this content and all these discussions, these are all average people. But the people in the arguments themselves are giant accounts. And you're all arguing back and forth, and then using pointing fingers at one person. You're doing this for engagement. All the while, in your accusations, you're also getting the views. I think it would be at least fair if we would acknowledge those things. Now, Isaac, March to Parliament is sorry. March to Parliament isn't about doing away with our constitution. I think you're making a very big mistake to associate the perhaps quote unquote, as you said, I'm using your quote, the perhaps actions of a few individuals to completely sum up an entire cause of many 100,000 people. Many. Go look at how far and wide became many people agreeing with it. And some obviously because of the bandwagon element, and others because they wanted engagement, especially for the big famous people on the app and around. But many Ugandans came onto this because we don't like seeing what's going on in the country. And your points, and there's a man, I think he's called Brian Wekesa in the comment section. He's been saying that radicalism won't change our country. But he assumes I'm speaking of, and I think also you assume that I'm speaking of radicalism. I've just seen a tweet of Tessidy's blabbering, but Hillary, that's why I took a pause, sorry. But March to Parliament is not in any way about removing the constitution of our country. I do not subscribe to any of those political parties. Hillary is of NUP. Fine. This isn't political. This isn't about saying that we will remove Nisa Mong and kill her. It's not about saying that Museveni is, at least that's why I'm here. And I'm going to speak for me and every single person who I was with in the many, many spaces that we've done, tens of them, throughout the whole month. And we will not allow for this seriously well fought discussion on Twitter. We have pushed so far, and we have really tried our best in our own capacities to make sure that every single person knows that corruption is bad. We have done that. We were national news. Every single person right now at least has a second thought in their mind when they're asking for a bribe. At least they have a second thought even if they proceed with it. That is a win. We cannot continue to say this is nothing, this is nothing, this is nothing. And look, I began this conversation acknowledging my own biases. And I acknowledge, look, I am Christian. I have my own views about certain things. I am African, I'm Ugandan, I'm black and excessively nationalistic. I have my views upon certain things about the West as well. But there is some things that are very, very important. Number one, give evidence, please. Number two, do not ban, every single Ugandan in March to Parliament under the armpits, like you said, of these big account people, these people who are famous and these people who are, who because of their fame and because of their, association with March to Parliament are seen as leaders in it. For goodness sake, it's been said countless times it's a leaderless movement. It's you, it's a personal thing. It's not for anybody. And I really wish and hope that you all had been in the Twitter spaces from the beginning at least. Because personally, I know Cynthia. We went to Garden City together with George and the other people. We were there. And then when police started chasing us, so they got separated, and then one group decided to go march without the rest of us catching up to them. That's basically what happened. Look, it's not right that you put me and Caroline and every single person into this singular group of saying, these people want to do this, they want to do this. Look, we love our country. And I said it earlier on, we don't want to see us become Libya. We don't want to see us become Sudan. We are excessively nationalistic. That's why we stand up and say corruption is wrong. And even what I'm saying right now is against you, Isaac, honestly. It's not. It's just simply stating the fact that our country, our whole country has problems. That's it. So now, whether it's funding or whether it's not funding, I agree you have a right to anger. You have a right to be angry at the fact that your questions have been thrown away, have been, disregarded. You have that right. Hillary has a right to be angry at the fact that somebody like James Fire chose to block him. You have that right, fine. But it's not what's singularly going to move our country forward. This really, and Brian Kessa did say about radicalism, and I want to get back to that point, and also Justice Hunter and so on and so forth. Look, radicalism is not in any way killing people. It is not, as Isaac had said, do away with all the laws. Look, come on, we have civilized people, all of us. And I really did not appreciate, Isaac, when you characterized Ugandans, and I would paraphrase, that as being, these people who can't understand, who need to be spoon-fed people, and then you talked about the Kenyan spaces. I've lived in Kenya for many years now, and I was last there in just before March to Parliament, and I came back to Uganda for March to Parliament. Look, the thing about Kenya, you rightly acknowledged, Isaac, is the internet aspect of it all. Their country has deep internet penetration. I agree, and that's a fact. But compared to Uganda, what kind of internet penetration does the nation have? 45 million. How many people use Twitter? How many people have access to phones? All these things. But even without that internet penetration, I don't think it's fair for you to discount